All right, here we go. I'm gonna try to do all the things and watch the chat and keep stuff moving. But also, I'm amenable to folks just want to come off mute and holler at me when I'm, going through stuff. Please, please, please do. Welcome to the Villain Workshop. We're gonna get into some characters, and yeah, it's gonna be a good time. I'm excited to work with y'all, and I hope that I can give you some offerings during this session that will make you think about your own writing and about writing that you've consumed in other ways. So let's ride. This is how we're gonna kick it. We're gonna talk about what we're gonna do, what you're doing now. We're gonna do a check-in, and you can check in the chat, or you can come off mute. Our guiding principles, or the stars that are going to take us to where we need to go today, are going to be purpose, methods, and communication. So in regard to antagonists, those are the sort of key points that we're going to be talking about. And then the stargazing and reflections, that's your time to write. So we're definitely going to generate some. If you have something in progress that has an antagonist, that's beautiful. You can work with that. If not, then you'll be able to use any example that you'd like to sort of work with and craft so that you have something in your own mind and your own handwriting that makes sense to you. So check-in is, who is your favorite villain? And we can start anywhere. Like I said, if you want to come off mute or if you want to drop it in the chat, we'll try to get as many folks to share as possible before we head to the next thing.
I gotta go with Ursula from the Little Mermaid. Ursula was a feminist icon, and people really don't understand that what she was doing was an act of service. All right, she was trying to spare Ariel.
I feel it. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
I have to co-sign with Ursula because aside from being a feminist icon, like I have to look at this like King Triton knew she was there. So it's a conversation about like, they decided to just like have this like impasse for a minute where he had control. I'm convinced that that is his sister, his older sister, and he took the throne. And, Triton's a piece of shit.
There we have it. Yeah, so this is getting into like the purpose aspect of these villains, right? Like what are they, these villains in some cases? What is actually grounding them in the behaviors or the activities that they're engaging in? So this is beautiful. We got Scar in the chat, Lion King Scar, I'm presuming. Got Doro from Wild Seed. A couple folks with Magneto, definitely one that is tenuous in many conversations. Hannibal, which Hannibal are we talking about? Because it's several Hannibals that could be classified as doing villainous things. Candyman, I'm not gonna say it that many times, Maurice, you braver than me, but we definitely gonna talk about Candyman in here too. Yeah, I love Hella, yep.
I was going to be basic and say the Joker, but I think Deathstroke is more my badass villain.
Yeah, I love it. Both great options. Zahir from Legend of Korra, that might be my boy right there, for real. This man was studied up and prepared.
I mean, Kuvera also from Legend of Korra. I mean, Kuvera might have been a autocrat and trainer, but she was tired of the BS. And I feel you on that one.
No, that's very true.
If we talking movies, I guess like I already forgot who I was gonna say. But I don't know. I guess Dracula in a lot of ways. From Castlevania, that aspect of him, but frankly, almost any aspect. He wants to eat you food. It is what it is. And like in the Castlevania arc, he's like, for real, he's grieving his wife. You kill my wife, I'll burn down the world too.
There it is. Feelings that we can identify with, right? So this is beautiful. Yeah, Zahir has one of my favorite quotes from like any antagonist when he breaks the second person, the other male, out of his prison. And he was like, oh, you're an airbender now, right? Like, this is cool. And he said, yeah, I have been given a gift. I think it's a sign that our purpose is a righteous one. And just like the grounding and what he believes is so strong for that character. We got vampires from Extinction Parade, Lady Boshi, Orquera Cordoba Escalante from the hit telenovela Maria de los Angeles. I am not familiar, but I'm intrigued. Gus from Breaking Bad. Yeah. These are beautiful. Okay, so keep them coming if you'd like. And if you're somebody that doesn't have your own IP to work with for the generative portions of this session, then you can work with one of your favorite villains just for the activities that we'll get into. Maybe you can use them as a jumping off point. And I'm gonna keep it rolling. We got some great ones in the chat, so don't be shy about letting them fly. I like to do a little bit more of an intro of myself because, like I said earlier, I know I don't get to share the roaming plains of Lit Mag Publishing with a lot of y'all, and so this is me. I was born and raised in Atlanta. I write exclusively fiction, exclusively for kids, and I'm a teaching artist. So I go around the nation when I'm able and desired to basically do workshops, you know, similar to what we've put together today, but I do something different every time. I'm always interested in meeting young students where they are and crafting experiences for them that like transform their relationship to writing. I think it's really hard for people sometimes to grow a love for it in how like traditional education is structured. So a big part of what I do is to try to show them a different side of it and hopefully bring them to like a writing legacy that is meaningful for them. I've been organizing here on the ground and in other ways in Atlanta and in different communities for like the last 10 years. I'm an abolitionist. I believe in prison abolition. And last year, my workshop was actually a world building workshop that was basically an abolitionist workshop and how we can take some principles from abolition to apply them to our futurism and our future sort of philosophies in order to create these worlds that hopefully we can see one day. I am at the really the onset of identifying as a neurodivergent writer. I've had this sort of like, you know, internal knowledge or association for some time now, but I'm really starting to, just at the beginning of embracing, labeling myself this way as I talk about who I am and what I do as a writer in hopes to just sort of bring more light to that conversation. I love music, as you can see. I love WNBA basketball. I played basketball my whole life and I'm just like obsessed with the WNBA. So anytime we're talking about those things or movies specifically, not TV, cartoons and true crime docs, I'm on board, I'm right there. I was a member of the inaugural Tin House YA workshop. And more importantly, I am a Voodoonauts co-founder. I don't know, have we explained co-founders yet this year? So many of y'all may know this is Yvette and Shingai's, this is their baby, right? They are the creators, the originators, they are the founders. I was lucky enough to get, you know, asked to instruct last year. And it started off as just, you know, I'm gonna show up and I'm gonna teach my class, but a year later, here we are, and we collaborate on many more aspects than just the teaching part of this whole deal. So, you know, LP and I are co-founders, but just Coco just sounds so much richer and sweeter that we decided to make our own little term to describe our positions here. And the most important role of all, I'm an older brother. I have one younger sibling. She's 7 years behind me, and it's like my whole world. So I think I talked about yesterday, I have some books coming out. Random House is starting off my middle grade sci-fi series called Futureland next year. And then I have a young adult romance coming out the year after that from FSG. So if we stay plugged in, I'll be talking more about those things as we go along. But yeah, this is who you're dealing with. I like y'all to know a little bit about me before I just start throwing concepts at you. So it's nice to meet y'all once again. Oh, damn, I forgot about this. Okay. I'm teaching a class at Catapult in September, apparently. And it's a 4-week class. And it's a longer version of something that we did with that Voodoonauts did in a partnership with Clarion West last year. This year, time isn't real. But my workshop was basically about how to do character development in a story where your time is non-linear. And so now I have a little bit more space to really broaden out that concept. And we're going to have 4 weeks, 1 meeting a week of this class. And so if you are interested or you know anybody that's interested, then, damn, that's not actually the link to the thing. Well, we'll get it to you. Yeah, I thought this was it. But yeah, if you're interested or you know anybody that might be interested, then definitely let them know about it. Okay, let me get my bearings back because I forgot I put this slide in here this morning. All right, so now we to the stuff, we to the thing, and this is gonna be a participatory component. I need people to weigh in and debate and box each other in the chat because I'm gonna lob up some open-ended questions and we're gonna have some jumping off points. So we're talking about these villains and their purpose. Like I said, the purpose of who they are and what they seek to do is the first component today of how we want to evaluate these characters. And then we're going to talk about their methods. And then we're going to talk about how they communicate themselves. So we're starting off with purpose. I'm sure this fellow is familiar to at least a couple of y'all. And so in as orderly as a fashion as you can, or maybe just in a bloodthirsty battle royale, please offer me and offer to the group what this being's purpose was from your perspective.
He wanted to supposedly save the world by killing off half the world, even though he should have just doubled the resources.
This is important, right? So like supposedly, and I think it's interesting that you start with save the world. Like that was his goal, right? Like to save the world. So I like that phrasing. Next,
I'd argue he's the protagonist of that story, though, not the antagonist. So I mean, Tony Stark's the bad guy in that movie series, those 2 movies. But I digress. My dude did want to save the world, though, is the first thing that pops into my mind for sure. But also he wanted to complete his journey, right? He wanted to find peace. And for him, that was correcting everything that was wrong with the world.
Yeah. So we have this internal motivation that's linked, right? Like, okay, I might have this altruistic thing to where I feel like I can make the world a better place, but also internally, I'm seeking solace through these activities that I won't be able to achieve until I get to where I'm going. So that internal driver is important too.
Okay, I'm about to blow this whole thing up. Are you ready?
Yeah, look, that's what I brought you in here for.
All right, so they had to compact it for the movie, right? In the comic books, Thanos is in love with the personification of death. And so his desire is not to kill half the people so that there are more resources. It's to kill all the people so that he can get death's attention. So in the movie, look, thirsty to a detriment. So in the movie, his logic is all the way fucked up. But in the comic books, it's a different kind of fucked up, but at least it makes some logic.
100%. Because if it wasn't for like the movie's flaws, it's like
you muted yourself, David. You're in mid-sentence.
He has to be the protagonist because in the movie, his plan is so flawed that only his internal logic works, not his external logic. But like, if you see him as the protagonist, then it kind of fulfills a thing. It's still stupid, but it at least makes more sense. But you're right, it makes more sense to want to destroy the whole universe, even if it is for the attention of somebody who ain't even gonna pay no attention to you in the end. But also his goal, either way, is never fulfilled. So like, even though he got want internal and external, he don't get fulfilled in the end.
Lovely. And the crossover framing from different mediums definitely helps as well, because we lose a lot in adaptation sometimes, for better or for worse. Any other offerings about this this man with this ridiculous looking chin that I can never seem not to fixate on?
I just think that considering the way the movie is framed, he can't be the protagonist because he's not the main character. I think we can consider him to be the hero if you agree with his methods. But I think like the way the movie is formatted, he has to be the antagonist because they're trying to stop him.
Mm-hmm.
Just about, yeah.
So the nuances or the differences of how we categorize protagonist, antagonist, hero, villain, these things, words mean things, right? And so we can use them to our advantage.
Also, just like this thing where I get every character having their own like arc.
Yep.
Like that's important, but if it doesn't make enough sense for you to have an arc, like they just like you watch the first movie, you're like, oh, well, why didn't he just double the resources? And then I was like, that doesn't. There's armies and there's ships and there's mercenaries and the shit, but like nobody was like, well, he could just never mind.
Right. All right. Moving on. We got more folks to critique. All right. So if you've seen Jordan,
Yes.
oh yeah, my boy Relis, he done piped up. He ready.
Spoiler alert, right?
Oh man, if y'all ain't seen, these is not new examples. So if y'all ain't seen these things, y'all better just get with it or get lost.
I've never been able to figure out the protagonist in this movie. I'm still debating that internally.
That's fair. So for the purpose of evaluation in this particular session, I actually want to do both of these characters. I want you to consider if each of these characters was the antagonist, then talk to me about how their purposes differ.
Okay, so looking at I forget what the term is for the doppelganger.
The tethered,
thank you. So looking at the tethered, she was put in a situation that she didn't ask for, right? And she was in a constant state of want, a constant state of hungry. And all she was doing was looking for a way to better her life, right? To find a different way to live her life, right? And so she took something that belonged from the real world girl. What's the character's first main character's name?
Adelaide,
thank you. Took something from Adelaide, right? Which was her life, right? Now, Adelaide comes back and she wants to reclaim her life, right? But she also sort of becomes a leader for a whole group of people that have been, for some strange and unknown reason, just kept underground and given poor resources. And so while we're up here living it up and having a great time, while tethered Adelaide is having a great time, all these other people are suffering. And so both of these women in one way or another is an antagonist. One of them is has stolen this privilege and she's living this privileged life for these other privileged people, right? And the other one wants to go ahead and not just steal back her privilege, but also wants to go ahead and steal from other people also.
Absolutely. Super thorough. No, I love it. And I love it because we're really attacking like the different steps in how this character builds their own purpose, right? Mm-hmm. We're looking at from point A all the way to point Z, what are the different things that influenced why this character made this choice to sort of pin their entire motivational drive on. And so that's what that answer gives me. Does anybody else have thoughts about either the tethered or the original and what their purpose might be.
Okay, so now I'm just like starting to think about this. I don't like horror movies, but this was the one I managed to like, watch through my eyes and see through. And I'm just thinking, okay, the original.
Yes.
Okay, no, let me start with like Adelaide. I don't know how to like classify them, but she starts off being selfish. She wants to leave the underground and come to the real world. And she's fine trapping someone else, who didn't ask to be trapped in that other world just for her own salvation. And then she moves on with her life, seemingly not concerned about what she did. Right. And then, she ends up having a family, and later on the family's, under attack. And so that kind of turns altruistic, and that she wants to save her family. That's kind of noble. So it's like it goes from selfish to selfless, but then back to selfish at the end when we find out, oh, this was a ploy all along. And then on the flip side, the one who goes underground, she didn't ask for this. And so she takes it upon herself as the one who can communicate to like deliver them. So kind of a freedom fighter type of role. But then her actions turn selfish in that when she comes up, like you could have decided like kill everyone and then, like get on, like, overthrow them, the people who are underneath become the people who are on top and move on. But the plan involved like torturing and killing other people, and specifically the person who trapped you, and it's like revenge. And that, in common jargon is kind of selfish. So it turns from selflessness to selfish. So it's kind of a cycle in the opposite direction for both of these characters, both of these antagonists.
Yeah. No, you said it all. You did exactly what you came to do.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up thought.
One second. We got, it looks like, oh, okay, you were talking. Yeah, I was wanting to make sure that Tabogo could speak. Please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to say that I think this example particularly is a really good way of showing how perspective changes who's viewed as the villain and who's viewed as the oppressed and the oppressor. Because I think in both cases, if we had to have the other person as the subject of the story, or the one who we're supposed to be rooting for or empathizing with, it might kind of change our perspective. And I think like an example that I heard a while ago was in a whale documentary, when you see the whale eating the plankton or like eating its prey, then you're like, oh yeah, great, it's lunchtime kind of thing. But then when you see a fish documentary where the whale is eating the fish, then you're like, how dare that whale is an evil being. And it's all about perspective, in everyone's story, nobody thinks of themselves as the villain. In very good villain stories, the villain doesn't think of themselves as the villain. They think they're the hero, or they think they're liberating someone in some way. And I think that parallels a lot of real world examples as well, where people who perhaps feel that they are protecting a certain type of system or a certain type of liberty within a system might end up really like devastating a certain population. But in their minds, they're like, but no, I'm helping these people. I'm being a force of good. So it's all about perspective. And I want to go back to what Awino was saying about altruism and about selfishness. And I feel that ultimately in every way, or like in many ways, altruism is selfish. Many people like do altruistic things for a purpose that is ultimately to serve themselves. And the question is that altruism, is that desire to serve myself benefiting others, or is it detrimenting others? Yeah.
Absolutely. No, lovely, lovely thoughts. Thank you so much for those. I got you, David, and we're gonna go with David, and then we're gonna move to the next one. I knew that this one would get under people's skin, but when we talked about revenge, I think a lot of times I'll do exactly what y'all are doing, which I love, which is break down every element of like how I can define this character's purpose, because as the people who are crafting these stories, right, like that's what we need to be able to have in our mental reserves. We need to know that entire story from long before the reader starts and long after they finish, so that we can portray it in a way that is full, real, authentic to our concepts. But I also, on the other end of the spectrum, want to be able to boil down, right? Like, especially because I write for kids, I want to be able to boil down into a word or a couple of words what these drives are, what these purposes are. And even if I have multiple that contradict, I still want to be able to express them shortly. And so revenge is a big one for the character that is swapped and trapped for me. Liberation is another thing that some people have said, right, that I think plays in very well. And I'll just get my personal idea off and then we'll go to David and switch. I think there's a lot of, for Adelaide, right, who remains up top, I think there's a lot of different drivers for this character. It's one of my favorite characters to study, but my personal favorite interpretation of that character's drive is literally to keep a secret. That's what they're trying to do for the entire movie. They don't want to go to the beach. They don't want to share too much about what's going on, right? So like there's so many layers we could pull back, but ultimately what's driving that character and everything that they're doing, all of the people that they kill, the way that they arrange their family, the way that they try to get as far from the situation as possible, is all to keep their secret. And I think that's like one of the brilliant parts of the movie, because they've been keeping it for 30 some odd years. And now we're brought into the story at the point at which that secret becomes a danger. So David, please.
I mean, you and the chat really are getting to exactly what my next point was. I mean, first, altruism is a lie. It's 100% a thing I believe in everything. And with all your stories, working from that mindset can help. Because, I mean, even if you look at, I mean, certain, like, I think about Buddhism and how, you know, you do these right things, but still your goal is nirvana. Like, so it's still a selfish goal, even if that goal is good. But like, I think the thing that works and doesn't work, like just taking Us and Infinity War, right, is the philosophical desire. That's like the philosophical theme, because that's where they fail. Because in the philosophical theme, if you look at Us and you can really see the protag and antag, both of them are in the same situation, but we just keep flipping situations, right? Their wants and desires are similar, except for Adelaide has a fear of being caught because she was the first one out. But the thing is who gets to be important is the philosophical thing. So Adelaide says, I'm important because I fought my way up here to get it. But the other young lady is like, I was born here, this mine. But like, I'm sorry, Red, Adelaide, it's hard to remember which one you start with, right?
Yep.
Because we starting with Adelaide, but the whole story is about Red.
Yep.
I mean, until we get there. And I think that works because the philosophical point of who gets to be important. And we pick one. There's a game, I think it's The Last of Us, where they switch protag and antag in the middle of the game and make you be the other person. And I think that's brilliant because that's what this does. Because like stories, we tell these same stories over and over. This like Man in the Iron Mask, but with a twist. Like, so when you come back, how do we not predict what was going to happen? He threw the twist in there. But that twist makes it fresh, and that twist is based on that philosophical theme. Whereas Thanos is like, I'm just going to do this, and I'm just going to do that. And him and Tony ain't really arguing about the same thing. And I think when your villain and your hero kind of arguing about the same thing, even if they don't want the same thing, but deep down they're arguing about the same thing, it kind of makes it easier to play off of.
Absolutely. No, I love that. I love that. And we see a lot of this, I think somebody in the chat called it confrontation about like what these characters are supposed to do, and questions about, you know, how do we know our protagonist and antagonist? How do we know that we have a full story, right? If we can take a character out and build them a whole nother story, or if, you know, we change the perspective, do we have just as compelling of a narrative and of a journey? And I think that that is sort of the, I think that's the nail that this whole session aims to hang on, right? It's like creating, not skipping over the part of the process where you get to create those ancillary characters that you could do that with. Okay, so we're gonna move on. I had two more examples, but we're only gonna do one because y'all are really smart and offering a lot of good things. And then we're gonna try to zoom through this next one. And then we're gonna get to some theory, if I can be as ambitious to call it that, and some writing. All right, so we got Christina Braithwaite from the television series version of Lovecraft Country. And I, I have thoughts about this character's purpose and how it's communicated and what it really is versus how it comes across to me. But if I could have just a couple people, maybe people that haven't shared yet, give some thoughts. I'll try to frame with mine, and then we'll keep kicking it. Oh, people haven't been watching it. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. All right, well then anybody that has seen it, if you're down to share a little bit and maybe try to be spoiler friendly as much as you can, just talking generally about this character's purpose, then I would love to hear it.
I think succinctly, I have a problem now. Another reason why I want to focus on Black stories is it's so easy to make a white character super evil. And I mean, even if they have a purpose, the purpose is still evil because in reality, in society, it's such a selfish drive. I just balancing reality and the speculative. Our lives are speculative, like we've been saying this whole workshop, right? So like Christina's saying, I like the hierarchy, right? Like we talk about society and, you know, white men on top, white women, black men, black women, and then like non-binary black people, and of course other people of color and stuff, but you get what I'm saying. And like in this story, to sum it up, her desires and where she falls, but also who she's willing to step on, making her the antagonist for the characters that we're supposed to be rooting for, I think works. Her desire is, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say a character's desire is power. And she has a reason for what she wants. And she's fighting for that. When the characters and her don't intersect, she's rather ambivalent about them. And I guess it works because it's like Tim was saying, it was grounded in reality. The reason why she really don't care what they do, as long as they ain't in her way, makes her such a decent antagonist, and it fits the overall story.
Yeah. I love that. I think that was a really, really cohesive way to like sum up this character and their purpose, especially in relation to other characters. I love that Laura says, I watched the show and I still don't know what their purpose is. And I think that's important, but I'm gonna let Maurice talk before I give my thoughts on that point. And thank you for offering to share something with us, Maurice. Go ahead, please.
For me, I guess she reminded me of like white feminism and how white women want to act like they don't contribute to white supremacy or patriarchy or any of the other isms. And I think if I was younger when I watched this show, I probably wouldn't be like, "Why are you trusting her, Ruby?" She is not trustable to anybody. But when I immediately saw her and how she was acting and how she was behaving, even though she was changing gender, I just don't trust white people with any type of magic or power, and they were villains. So I thought that was interesting. But Ruby Baptiste character, she sort of reminded me of the last two people were talking about being tethered, how she's like surviving and thriving, also survival of the fittest, also surviving to the detriment of your community and how much information they lack. So that's what I thought about Ruby Baptiste's character. Like if they had continued to show, like would she be a villain or a hero or kind of like both, a combination of both of what she was doing, because she was going through so many taboos in my opinion, about what it means to like be Black and have power and what you do with that power and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's beautiful. You said a lot. You said a lot. So it looks like, and I haven't read the book, full transparency, but it looks like folks are offering us that in the book, this Christina character is a male. Is that what I'm understanding? And folks are saying that the male character is like somewhat inconsequential. And I think this is important, tying it back to what Laura was asking, right? Because in the first couple of, I guess, instances that we get a chance to talk to this character, especially as they're talking about a lot of the things that we've already said, right? Like who is holding power in this situation, whose, gender expression grants them certain rights to do certain things. There's a really, really nuanced but acute focus on the fact that this character, Christina, as a woman, feels slighted, right? Feels like she should have access to power because of everything that she has done, but is not able to achieve that power in this world because she is a woman. And right, but like the story doesn't really give credence to that in a way that allows this character to flesh themselves out. To David's point, the character is pretty ambivalent, right? Like ambivalent and they're really violent. And so it's hard to sort of pin down like why, especially as the series goes on and we don't get as many of those interactions that give us expression of this character's internal. Like there's an internal motivation that I think is probably the strongest thing, but that's another thing that happens with adaptation, especially when you gender bend a character, right? Is not, you haven't created a new character. You haven't done the work that we're talking about doing right here necessarily. Depends on who's in the room and what they have in their hands. You've just overlaid a different identity on top of a character that already existed. And so now we can see, right? We can see that this wallpaper is over this shoddy wall behind it, right? Like we know that you're giving us something, but you're not giving us it all. And it may be because you didn't fill it all in. And so that's another thing that we're trying to avoid. I would love to talk to y'all for 2 hours about every one of these, but we're gonna keep it pushing. All right, so we're just gonna talk about this guy, but we're not gonna do that. We're gonna keep pushing. All right, so here is the time where I actually try to give you things that may be helpful to you. As we've already talked about, develop your antagonist background like you would your main character, right? And in some cases, I think it may be helpful to start building your antagonist before you start building your main character, because I think as an impulse, right, we start with the character that we know folks are going to follow most often, and then we build their opposition. I'm going to say a lot today, detach from your protagonist. We build our antagonist in opposition to be a foil of your protagonist, which I know like is the sort of technical aspect of what they do. But I want us to think about embracing this concept of these two separate entities, right, that are brought together by the story. They don't bring the story together, they're brought together by the story. And so I think detaching and maybe inverting how you start building your character list could be helpful. So that's the first two bullets. Questions, what are they lacking and what are they seeking? I asked this question about all the examples that we're going to go through today, and the answers were just simple in some cases, not so simple in other cases, and sometimes it was hard to tell. And so I think that it's a helpful one. What do they stand to gain? What do they stand to lose? What are the villain's stakes? This matters to me because we often know exactly what the stakes for our protagonists are, and we're pushed in pretty much every like literary space to focus on that, to raise stakes, to hone in, to make them complex. And we don't want to say, oh, the hero shouldn't just be trying to save the world, right? Like, what are the stakes to them that matter right now? But for antagonists, they just want to take over, right? Like, and if they're foiled, then what happens? They're foiled and they'll come back later or they die, right? But like, let's give them the same sort of foundation to have multi-layered and complex stakes, because I think it'll change your story. And then how does their main purpose align to or inform literally everything else about them? So this is the cool part in spec, in my opinion, because we can play with shape and form of the actual character, right? If their purpose is to make the world dark, make the world a dark place, whatever that may mean, then does their physical embodiment or their personality expression or their manner of communication involve some sort of expression of darkness that we can put to a physical or to a tangible thing, right? We can start taking these theoretical concepts and tying them into the actual tangible aspects of the character in ways that contemporary, non-spec literature don't necessarily offer us the same kind of expansiveness to do. So I'm going to put these questions back up because they may be helpful, but I'm just going to go to the prompt on the next slide, and then I'm going to set a little timer. So the first reflection is spend some time framing or reframing, if you've already started an antagonist, with their purpose. Get underneath what you've already written, plant some new ideas, subvert convention, be bold, take risks, make it cute. I'm gonna give folks until 00, and I'm gonna go back to the slide of questions in case those are helpful for you as you start to basically outline your character's purpose. And I will be in the chat, so you can private chat me or write in here if you need me while we're writing. So maybe I'll play some more music, and then y'all can write for 10 minutes. Does that sound cool? Okay.
Take your time, think about if you doubt. This is what you want, cause I give up now. I don't wanna lose my friend. Swear I tried letting go, but I won't. I've been all around on this merry-go, hoping I could be your man. Baby, I hear your words, but I see your eyes. For what it's worth, you repeat in mine. And I know we got something real that we can hide. So let me know if you feel like I feel. Let me if you feel like I feel.
If I ride, like really ride, how will I know that it won't just give me vertigo? I don't wanna feel that pain again. Then again, more than friends, sounds divine. I just can't explain what I feel inside, but I don't wanna miss your train. Ooh, I'm getting tired of stuck inside. I feel a family of butterflies, all in my gut, all in the fluid light.
So let me if you feel like I feel. Let me if you feel like I feel. Springtime, I want summertime. Deep in love, we can fall in the autumn time. Hold me ever close in the wintertime, every time. I want springtime, I want summertime. Deep in love, we can fall in the autumn time. Hold me ever close in the wintertime, every time. So let me if you feel like I feel. Let me if you feel like I feel. I want summertime, deep in love, we can fall in the autumn time. Ever close in the wintertime, every time.
All right, let's bring it on back if folks are ready. How was that? Folks have ideas flowing? Feeling like things are making sense? Just scrolling through, looking at some of these faces. It's like folks might be finishing up. All right. Y'all ready? People shaking their heads. Are y'all good? Y'all in y'all feelings? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's important. Okay. I want to address this, but I'll talk to you later about it all because it's an interesting idea to me. All right, we're gonna keep it rolling. I'm gonna assume y'all are okay, even though nobody is giving me signs of life. I'm just gonna hope that if I keep doing these chest compressions, y'all will come back.
Flatline.
Stop. All right. So methods. Now we talk about methods. So we had the purpose, right? And then we've already started talking a little bit about like how people are going about achieving their purpose is looking different, right? Like, why are we murking half the people instead of doubling the resources? This is a question that we can ask, right? But regardless of what we choose, the methods are important to how we present this character to the world. So this is the wolf from, well, I'm gonna say it's the wolf from Little Red Riding Hood. I don't actually know if it's the one from Three Little Pigs or not, but I like to use the Little Red Riding Hood example because I think the methods were very specific, right? At least in most versions of, most like modernized versions of how the story is told. So we got this wolf and is using a lot of hunting methods, right? So his purpose is to eat, to try to find somebody to eat, something to eat. And he's doing a lot of hunting. So he's spying, he's tracking. At a certain point in time, he starts having discussions with Little Red and he's lying, right? So another method that he's using to get to his aim. He is plotting and planning in terms of how he's going to connect his lie to put Little Red in a precarious situation. Then he's playing dress up, right? He's costuming. He's literally changing his appearance to throw Little Red off of the idea that she is in a safe situation. So deception is another thing. A lot of these methods are conniving and sly. There's not too many physical things beyond the dressing up, but we can break down at each step how this character used different tactics to try to get to his ultimate goal. And so that's just a little bit of framing, and then we're going to get back into letting y'all duke it out over some other characters and what y'all perceive from their methods. So yeah, turn it up again. That was my reaction when I thought to put them in here. This is Cersei Lannister from the television version of Game of Thrones, and I know this one is gonna make people upset. So, and there's gonna be folks who are like, Cersei's not a villain, which is fine. That's why we're here, to fight each other as a family, to become villains ourselves. But we're specifically talking about methods. So please, let's try to keep it reined in so we can keep it moving. We don't want to go too much into why she was trying to do this or that or the third, but we know that she was trying to do a set of things, and let's talk about what she was enacting, what action she was taking to try to ensure that she could do those things. We can keep raising hands and stuff like that, especially if there's a lot of people that want to weigh in. LP, run it.
Yeah, I mean, her thing is maintaining the status quo by any means possible. Essentially, like, she bought her father essentially sold her into a position of power, and she is trying to keep it by any means possible. And she will lie, she will sell, she will pay, she will buy. It, like nothing is beneath her, and she will do it all.
Very true.
Is her having sex with her brother, does that make her a villain too?
That is not a part of my assessment, you know.
Well, no, like just thinking about all of her life is curated, and this thing that she does with her brother is like a thing that is her own, that belongs to her, versus literally everything else in her life, minus her children probably.
Yeah, so I actually have a different, like, in terms of like I agree that there's a power sort of undergirding, there's a power grab undergirding her like purpose, right? But I think about it a little bit differently. And because of that, I think about her having these kids and the way that she acts about them to be tied into that. So it's probably something that I need to voice note you about later. But yes, so the methods that we pulled from LP's statement, right? Like buying in terms of contracting murder, selling, getting people, selling people into bondage, right? Like lying, all of this kind of stuff. These are the things that Cersei is using in her pursuit of maintaining status quo. If we use that frame. Tanaja, please.
Also, the thing I was going to add is that sort of Cersei to me represents a maximal understanding that her body is her chief form of currency in this time. And then also, like, you know, she increased her power by sort of being in a position to utilize other people's bodies as currency as well. I mean, because these were the skills that she had. You get what I'm saying? Like, these were the tools and the things available to her. And her whole ethos is literally better you than me. Like, it's going to be you before it's me. You know what I'm saying? And these are the things that I have to do to not just hold on to power, but to protect myself. Because if she is not this power, then what is she? She's a commodity just like every other woman in the damn show. And then finally, her relationship with her brother always struck me as, like, quite frankly, you know, I'm gonna have to be fucked by a dude somehow, you know what I'm saying? But at least I can choose you. And at least I fundamentally really, I know you, you know what I mean? And so better you than to be used by some other man in this series.
Yeah, no, everything was so astute. So I won't even attempt to rephrase, because there's not a way that I could have said it better than you, but just to bring some things to the surface, right? Like, we have the stated purpose or the stated goals: protection, not becoming, you know, basically like trodden underfoot by all of the isms that exist in this time and that trampled all of the other women, and using her body as currency and finding ways to manipulate the usage of the bodies of others, I think is like a really, really astute one. That is not something that we might typically think about to write down, right? If we say, how is our villain gonna use their power to do what they gotta do? I wouldn't think like, oh, they're gonna use other people's bodies to do that. And that can mean so many things if we turn this to spec. So, or turn any idea to spec. Other folks, methods that they found Cersei using.
I was just saying, like, I kind of feel like, you know, how characters have these hangups, you know, that make them make their decisions, like these things that they're afraid of. And I think the way they were raised by their father, like, you think about the house codes, right? And Lannisters always repay their debts wasn't their house code, but it's how they were raised. It almost feels like it's their house code. And there's this idea of debts and being used, and just how they all were viewed as a commodity. Jaime had to be a warrior in the air. Cersei was her body, you know, and Tyrion was worthless. And I think, like, those wounds made them who they were. And she chose to be like, all right, I'm gonna be ruthless, man. And also I'm gonna carve out this space for myself. And I mean, her characterization says she's gonna make decisions based on that. So like, I don't know, Jamie is the only person she can trust because they twins. So he's supposed to be her, and that's why his betrayals are always so deep for her. And it's like the only time she cries when her kids die, but like, oh, dang, spoilers, man. Sorry. Oh, wow. Okay.
Fuck them kids.
But like, she really is only ever really ticked about Jamie. That's the real thing that gets her going. And I think Jamie was a representation of her to herself.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry about that, guys.
What you said about, and Tanaja also said something very similar about like her disposition to everybody else, right? Like the ruthlessness and like, which we can break down into smaller pieces, but as an umbrella, like it happens to be a method, right? The way of my philosophy towards the world and like what that means about how I'm going to interact with everybody is greatly informing the actions that I choose. And if everything is in line with those actions, then it does become a part of my methods. So we're gonna keep it rolling. Has anybody other than myself seen this movie?
Kind of looks familiar. Who is that?
Well, the white man is Justin Long, but the demon is called Jeepers Creepers. The movie came out in the early 2000s. And this is one of my favorite lores. Like I'm actually, me and my agent are trying to find like the director of the movie with the screenplay because I want to write in this IP so bad. But if nobody else got it, then I will relish in explaining why this character looks like this and what he doing. Maurice, I did see that you had a hand up, but then it came down. So I want to make the space for you to offer anything if you have it.
Oh no, I've seen the movie and I know about the director. I don't know if you know all the things about.
Oh yeah,
him.
which is exactly why he need to hand that IP over, my boy, because you ain't gonna be able to do nothing else with it. Might as well give it to me.
Yeah. No, I think it. So I think if anybody's the villain of that movie, it's him. I don't know if you were gonna ask that, but I don't know. I don't know what you were going to ask me about the film, but I think the character literally eating other people in parts and appropriating them is interesting when you start talking about white people or white supremacy or people like devouring our Black bodies. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting about the character.
Yeah. So that's like one of the main methods that this character is using. A little shaky on the purpose from the story that we get, but we are very clear on the methods. This is a horror movie about two teenagers on a road trip, and they, basically come across this figure that they're not sure what it is yet, but they can tell that it's harming people. And the lore comes out that this is some sort of demon that every 23 years for 23 days, it is unleashed upon the world and it has a chance to feed. And so it basically spends 23 days terrorizing people and feeding on their body parts, like Maurice said, to appropriate them into its own body. So if it loses a hand, it can find somebody and eat their hand and replace its hand, so on and so forth. We don't get a lot of rationale as to why that is happening, but the character is somewhat incognito, like at least for the first half of this first movie. And so it also is using deception, is using cosplaying as if it's a human. It has a sense by which it can determine what it wants to eat from you based on the pheromones in your fear. So terrorism is another tactic that this character uses to scare potential victims to understand what from them it might want to take. And I know that this seems like an example that not a lot of people are familiar with, but as a monster, like as a speculative monster, it's like very, very acutely crafted. And I think that it does what I was trying to talk about doing in the last few slides, which is how do we take something non-human, a non-human antagonist or some other sort of beast, right? and literally give them an embodiment of what their purpose is, right? Super sharp teeth, super claws, all of that kind of stuff, right? We can show this character's purpose, not only through their methods, but through how they look to us. Maurice, please.
No, I was gonna say I think it's interesting, like thinking back, like the movie's about teenagers, but it's about very, very white teenagers or white people going expecting something that ain't none of their business.
Yep.
You know, because if I see you dumping something in the hole, I'm not going to check it out. I don't care. But also, I think it's interesting, like, I'm not making fun of anybody, but there is some, I think musicians or entertainers getting attacked by tigers. And it's just like, is a tiger evil or is a tiger just being a tiger? And the monster reminds me of, you know, it's an animal, but it's a living being. Is it just doing what it does? Like it's eating because I'm hungry. I don't care. It's my prey, you know? So I think that the type of monster, type of villain for this one is like interesting when it's really animalistic because it doesn't talk and it can talk because, you know, it eats people's tongues and vocal cords, but it's just interesting when they create certain monsters who don't talk or, you know, don't communicate in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, and in the communication piece, I'm gonna address that specifically. And I like what you said about, like, you know, this analogy with the tigers, because this is also another good example, in my opinion, of an antagonist detachment from the protagonist. This monster has nothing to do with these teenagers. Literally, it doesn't even know they exist. It's there for its 23 days and it's gonna do whatever it's gonna do during that time. But as Maurice put, when they start investigating off of a hint that they see and they want to get into the monster's space and figure things out, right? That's when it becomes their problem. And so it's a really good way to have, even though there's definitely elements of the character that we could have more backstory from, it's a character that is autonomous and doesn't really need a protagonist to have a valid motivation. Its motivation comes complete. One last thing, Maurice? Or just hand was still up?
Oh, it's just up. I don't know how to make it go down.
Oh, okay. I think I can do it. My bad. I thought you had something else. All right. So let's keep it rolling. So what are your antagonist methods and their powers? Can they wield magic? Can they bend elements? Do they keep secrets, tell lies, manipulate people? Do they have other supernatural powers, and from where are they derived? And are these powers linked to their purpose? Like the most important question probably. And is that linked to their physical manifestation in any way, right? So with your characters that you're working with, let's start to put tools in their bag. It's likely that there are already some there, but let's get a little bit deeper into why their methods, the methods that they use, are specifically chosen for them. If they're using magic, why? Why is that the case, right? Even if it's in a magical world where most people are using magic, why are they using it? And what would it look like if they didn't use it, right? All of these things to consider and choices give us a chance to create a character that is distinct in its own right. And that is the whole goal of what we're trying to do here today. So questions before we get into the next prompt for your little writing piece of outlining your character's methods. If not, we will roll at 20 and I'll bring y'all back at 30. So spend some time building out these different powers, tactics, why these, how do they develop, how are they going to use them, and detach, right? If your protagonist is a water creature, then maybe your antagonist doesn't have to be a fire creature, right? Like let's switch things up a little bit and figure out how we can make them autonomous. Y'all got it. I'm gonna start the music again.
I just need a smoke break just to calm my nerves. I just need to go away somewhere far from Earth. I just wanna float away on the riverside somewhere, hitting shrooms, getting mountain high. I just need a smoke break just to clear my mind, just for all the bullshit I go through in life. I just live law, hoping that I find all the answers from ancestors in the sky. I just need a melody just to soothe my soul, just like Lula's food when I was a boy. Time going fast, we're all getting old in a hell of a ride like a roller coaster.
Some things never change, but I still feel no way. Looking out at the waves, different day, different page. Some things never change, but I still feel no ways. Looking out at the waves, different day, different.
Oh yeah.
It was a late Sunday when the drama went down. Ghetto twins on the spins, hustler foot of their crown. On the lake deck swinging, so you know we drinking. Roll the L's up on the trunk of the truck, so you know we sinking. Boom clack, bass heavy in the back. Kodaks and throwbacks, pink smoke and cognac. I'm trippy. Louis 50 in my Timbers pretty. I got my girls with me, Gabby, Brittany, and Brittany, friend and Kitty. We all chilling on that red Lex, leather pants, dookie black shorts, bitch. I take your man. Snowballs and alcohol, sweating out my drawers. Bounce on once and twos, I'm about to hit the wall. I leave it sleazy, breezy, West Coast, so then please believe me. Sonically, I'm into hippie, like bombing up the levees. Sipping on this bitch, swinging, swipping on the switch. My song come on, they know this on DJ. Put the bitch. House party by my boy Derek house. Everybody hop up in the back of the truck. We about to head out. Women, liquor, niggas, jigging, playing jigger. Them stank hoes, them earthy hoes, them messy hoes from Kinder.
Say boyfriend, why you acting funny? You must got money, see the Bendy bag, deep and Yankee. You know I've been waiting for you.
On clay ball, what an attitude. But you change it all around when you come around. I'm so happy. I smile to be real. Just being honest. Just being honest. To be real. Just being honest.
I know this girl out the Iberville. She loves to keep it real. Work it, keep it real. Work it. Now pin it over. Come on. Work it. See you when you work it. Be real, Miss Saint. She be real. You be real. You love it. Now pin it. Rock. Hands on your knees. Ooh, hands on your knees. Yeah, this is what I want you to do for me now. You will mean. Got you moving like a washing machine. Like around and around and around.
These things are always sitting around. And now I know I'm lost and found.
You already know.
When you find a piece of what you had, you never realize what you gave. To be real. Being honest. To be real.
Come on. I want to know who motherfucking representing it here tonight. Hold on, hold on.
Keep letting you back in. How can I explain myself? You said you cared for me,
Louisiana shit. Murder on the beat. Something for y'all to cut up to, you know? Yeah. Everybody get your motherfucking roll on. I know shorty and she doesn't want no slow song. Had a man last year, life goes on. Haven't let that thing loose, girl, in so long. You been inside, know you like to lay low. I've been peeping what you bringing to the table. Working hard, girl, everything paid for. First, last phone bill, car, no cable. With your phone out, gotta hit them angles. With your phone out, snapping like you Fable. And you showing off, but it's alright. And you showing off, but it's alright. It's a short life, yeah. That's a real one in your reflection. Without a follow, without a mention. You really piping up on these niggas. You gotta be nice for what to these niggas? I understand. You got 100 bands, you got a baby bands, you got some bad friends. High school pics, you was even bad then. You ain't stressing off no lover in the past tense. You already had them. Work at 8 a.m., finish round 5. Post talk down, you don't see them outside. Yeah, they don't really be the same offline. You know dog days, you know hard times. Doing overtime for the last month. Saturday, call the girls, get them gassed up. Gotta hit the club, gotta make the ass jump. Gotta hit the club like you hit the motherfucking angles. With your phone out, snapping like you Fable. And you showing off, but it's alright. And you showing off, but it's alright. It's a short life.
These hoes, your boy, I made.
Watch the breakdown. That's a real one in your reflection. Without a follow, without a mention. You really piping up on these niggas. You gotta be nice for what to these niggas? I understand. Gotta hit the club like you hit them angles. It's a short life.
You said you down for me, give to me, give to me. Why won't you live for me?
All right. Go ahead and wrap up this component. Gonna bring it on back. All right. We are turning the corner on the last little bit of the session. And so now we're going to talk about communication. So we got a couple more examples, and we've already flowed into how we learn about these characters and their purposes already. So we're just going to continue that. All right. So somebody mentioned this fellow earlier. This is Candyman from the film adaptation of the short story that became the first visual version of Candyman that I think the world probably saw. Would anybody like to explain the way in which we learn about what Candyman, who Candyman is and what he's there to do? So not necessarily giving us the details of his purpose or how he's achieving it, but does he tell us? Does somebody else tell us? How do we figure out what he's there to do? It looks like LP want to dive in. I'm gonna let Chicago rock. I ain't even gonna step in the way.
You know, there's only one way to do it, and that's the right way. So it is what it is. Yeah, so he doesn't communicate to us what his purpose is. We get that from a white lady, from a white lady with stakes. And so it's interesting because the first movie is kind of divorced from that, in that like there's a method to the madness in the second movie. Like there's a reason why he's going after the people he's going after. In the first movie, we don't get that, besides it being, I'm in New Orleans right now. That's weird. Chicago to New Orleans. The second movie takes place in New Orleans. The first movie takes place in Cabrini Green, or what's left of it. And so we get the conversation about his origin story and where he started and where he's going and what he's doing based on what this white lady finds out in her like late 20s, early 30s.
And if you could please, why is she trying to find this out at all?
Because Candyman is stalking people who are in her family and close to her. And so she tries to figure it. This movie is like 20 fucking years old. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. So Candyman is stalking people in her world, in her lineage. And what she finds out is that she's descended from a black man and a white woman who had a child. And when the people of New Orleans found out that this black man had sex with this white woman, they cut off his hand, gave him a hook, right? And then like smothered him in honey so that the bees would come and get him. And that's how he became the Candyman. As a ghost, he was a ghost. He wasn't a person walking around with a hook and yeah. But all that to say, like, no, we never get any of his story from him. We get it from someone piecing it together, and she puts him to rest by teaching her daughter their lineage by remembering him.
For sure. I think, well, does anybody else have thoughts about how we are communicated, about how Candyman's history and origin is communicated to us?
It's like a white academic studying Black culture, or Black folklore specifically. And she goes to the project to learn about it. And this is how like the story comes out, right? And so she's studying us, and that's how the story comes out.
For sure. Yep. And both of these have touched on it. But I want to name like this white lady, while we are getting the story primarily from what she's piecing together, we are like, she doesn't get the story without like the folklore and the oral history of folks in that neighborhood who know to tell it. So primarily the communication that we get, even though it comes to her as a vessel, right? It like belongs to the community. The narrative is in the atmosphere of this community, and that's where it resides. She just happens to implant herself in it for whatever choices were made in direction. And so we can have a character that never tells us what they're here to do, but we can still get that story through other ways. And the way that we make those choices are probably important. I'm sorry for folks that haven't seen GOT, because I'm coming with another one. And I know I already made some folks mad. But this fellow here, this is somewhat of an example in negative space. Because if I am gonna ask how, for the film specifically, or for the TV series specifically, if I'm gonna ask how we get this person's origin or story, then I think that the answer, for those of you who have seen it, the answer will like be, it'll reveal itself. So does anybody want to take a crack at it?
It's the silence for me though.
Yeah, I don't know if it's silence because people not rocking with me, or silence because niggas really don't know what the hell this creature is about.
For me, his origin story was just so damn convoluted that I never understood it, and I watched it twice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they show, isn't it the children of the forest who made him?
Yes, that is one thing we do know. So yeah, we know that the children of the forest created him. The three-eyed raven shows us that through Bran or something like that when they visit up there, and that was supposed to be one of the prequel things that HBO is working on, but who knows when that's coming.
But I still don't know why.
And we still don't know why. So this is exactly why I wanted to use this example, because I think that for the sake of the film, it was done very poorly. We have a character who is, you know, probably seen as like the big bad, like the grand antagonist. For as much as we can piece together, his purpose is to destroy the human life that is in the, you know, geographical space that he can reach. He's using methods of turning living people into an army of the dead. And in terms of communication, we get a little piece of something that comes basically from an oracle character of how he got turned into this monster from a human. But we don't get anything else. And this character itself actually doesn't speak. It never speaks verbally. So this is an example of like the imbalance, right? I was just talking in the chat about how if you're gonna go light on one element, right? If you're gonna have a really simple purpose, then we need to do more work in communication and in methods. If the methods are gonna be really simple, as a villain, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna slice everybody's right finger off, right? Then we need to make sure that the purpose behind that is compelling enough, or the way that it's communicated is complex enough to actually give us something to grasp. They had two big deficits here. One was not giving us a thorough grounding in this character's purpose for the sake of the TV series. And the other deficit was not giving this character enough ways to communicate what that was, or enough ways for the show to communicate to us what the purpose was. And so we were left with only methods, just a ugly ass ice demon killing people for like 8 seasons, and we really don't know why. And so that is the thing that we don't want to do, if that makes sense. And some people are talking about the books as opposed to the show, which I know is always contentious. But yes, don't be like HBO with this guy here. All right, so how do we learn things about what's driving the the antagonist, sorry. Urban legends and folktales, like in Jeepers Creepers. Oh, I'm sorry, Maurice, did you have something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I guess thinking about it, like, what's the motivation, or what type of thing are we telling? Because like, if we're talking about a horror story, part of the thing you're doing, I think, is to scare the audience. But if you're talking about like, I mean, I'm older, so I watched Melrose Place, and that wasn't scary, but the Heather Locklear character, she was the villain, the one you love to hate, so you knew more about her. So I guess it depends on, you know, if it's a comedy or romance, like what, you know, I don't know if Devil Wears Prada is a romance or romantic comedy, but I can't remember the main person's name right now, but she's the big bad, she's the evil. So I guess it depends on what are you trying to do with it. It's just, I think of that Game of Thrones. I don't know if it's a horror or a thriller, but it seems like a monster type big bad. So that just kind of made me think about that when you were showing that character. So I guess if it's a horror movie, what are the monsters or the villains used for? Is for romantic comedy? What are they used for? That's what it just seems like. If it's a horror, a lot of the monsters or villains, besides Silence of the Lamb, Hannibal, you don't really hear them talk a lot. But in Hannibal or Silence of the Lamb, he talks all the time, and you get like a lot of backstory. And he's very articulate, but he's still very scary. So, but I don't know that him being in jail and you don't have access to him, you know, the public, they only know what they see. So it's still, I feel like there's still that silence around these people or these monsters. So that's right.
No, I think genre is important, an important consideration, because a lot of our spec works, right, especially in Afrofuturism, we're writing into what we hope to see, but we're pulling a lot from legacies that we have passed by, and so inherently we're using a lot of we're invoking a lot of history and a lot of scaffolding just so that the reader can understand like where we are at that point in time. With these epic narratives, whether they be adventures or horrors or whatever the case may be, if it's some type of fantasy romance, right? Like some type of speculative romance that is more contemporary-ish, it's just in terms of like the character relationships, it's just that the world is really fantastical, then we might have less to do in the way of like a third-party romantic lover that wants to get in the way between the two main lovers, right? Like we don't necessarily need generations of story building and the space to communicate that to offer why that character is doing what they're doing. So I think genre is important to consider as well. And based on what genre we're in and literally how much, I mean, you know, the industry has all these benchmarks, like how much story space we literally have. Are you writing a 140K book? Or are you writing an 80K book? We can analyze how much airtime we're giving all these characters, whether they're speaking or whether they're being spoken about, and decide like, you know, have we really gave diligence to making their story believable, full in the way that it needs to be, and independent enough that it makes sense beyond just as something that the protagonist is bouncing off of. So yeah, I totally dig what you're saying. Back to this slide, we learn about these folks in a variety of ways, sometimes through urban legends and folk tales that are told about them. Audacious statements that they make. I'm using a lot of that in Rosewood, and I may need to scale back on it somewhat, right? But like villains will pull up sometimes and be like, you know what I'm here to do? And then they'll tell you their whole plan. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Oracles and prophecies, right? So specific people who have relationships to the spec aspects of your world that can divine things that the other regular people can't for whatever reason. They can be our gateway to information. Broken conversations, whispers, and secrets. The Game of Thrones does a lot of this because the whole show is basically just about gossip. And you get a lot of pieces of conversations where people are talking about somebody else. And, you know, as a viewer, at least for me, one of the fun parts was like connecting something that somebody said a couple episodes to what somebody's saying now in a completely different setting and conversation. And so you can use those things to your advantage. Also secrets from, you know, characters that have secrets from other characters. It can work very effectively to bring the reader into a space where they're more privileged than the other group of people that are actually in the world of the story, depending on what you're trying to do. And then literal tale keepers. These people may have, you know, speculative abilities or not, or they may just be the folks who are holding that knowledge for the story world that can communicate it. Maybe it's written down, maybe it's not. Maybe it's a humanoid being and maybe it's not. But these are just a few of the ways that we can learn about what's driving these antagonists. And most of these don't include them speaking. But if we wanted to ramp up them speaking, we can do that too. All right. So our last little writing session, we're going to do like 7 or 8 minutes because I want to give enough time to close out. But yeah, y'all know the sort of cadence by now. So I'll be in the chat, take some time, look at your previous notes. You got some purpose written down already. You got some methods written down already. Now, how do we learn about this antagonist, right? If you're writing a dual POV novel, do we start with their POV instead of with our protagonist, right? Like there's so many ways that we could switch things up and make it interesting. Does their antagonist have some sort of telekinetic or telepathic like abilities by which they can interrupt your protagonist's thoughts? There's so many different ways to incorporate their own voice and their own narrative and make it as important as the protagonist's narrative. So I'm gonna give y'all time. Then I'm gonna bring y'all back. We're almost at the end.
Dirty computer walking by. If you look closer, you'll recognize I'm not that special. I'm broken inside, crashing slowly. The bugs are in me. Dirty computer. It's only me, you dirty computer. Dirty computer. You dirty computer. Dirty computer. I love you in the space and time. I love you in the space and time.
There's something about your aura.
Ran around with my some more fiends, write the break some more records, and write the word I see. Got body on action, fighting trying to save me. Might need a stretcher, I'm holding on to my cool. Give me a second to call off my goons, so I can pay you back in the name of the moon. So I can pay you back in the name of the moon. Changing form, for you I'd say a raging swarm. The demons I ain't afraid no more. Come get this cause this place is yours. Oh, can't ignore the fact that I became too short. That you be mine and I'd be yours. So bust it, what you waiting for? Purple runner, I'll be your Sailor Moon. I'll be your Sailor Moon. I'll be your Sailor Moon. I'll take it to the moon. There's only room for two. And I wanna go with you. I'll be your Sailor Moon. You might be my dream. I feel no pressure, flying with no wing. I like us together, tied with no string. Down for whatever timing might bring. Like power jets is on my shoes. I travel anywhere with you. Safely bring you back in the name of the moon. I can pay you back in the name of the moon. Changing form, for you I slay a raging swarm. The demons I ain't afraid no more. Come get this cause this place is yours. That you be mine and I'd be yours. So what's it what you waiting for? I'll be your Sailor Moon. I'll be your Sailor Moon. I'll be your Sailor Moon. I'll take it to the moon. There's only room for two. And I wanna go with you. I'll be your Sailor Moon for you.
Yeah, diamond life, love a girl. Music transport people to another world. In the city life, you my nature pearl. I won't forsake or try to. Yeah, I didn't play with hearts, wish fate would have it otherwise. You stole my heart, is it a crime? I still listen to all your shit, but it's never good as the first time on Inglewood. I love your life. Music, you're my only wife. Need you to lift me up, cause now I'm stuck here banging Sade. Sade, Sade, shout it. Banging Sade, 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 shout it. How did I get in this hotel room? Conscious been pulling my coattail soon. I'ma be making up folktales, telling myself it's true. July like June. Jew limelight often. Jew crime fight through music. Jew swipe like broom. Jew knock them down when you need them, then leave them. Jew pipe too. Jew eyesight head on the swivel. Jew fickle. Jew light bright fool. Jew psychiatrist convinced Jew self. Jew live that high life. Ooh. Hindsight always tell the story more accurately than most. She let me in, but that ain't much reason to boast. I'm just banging Sade. Sade, 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 banging Sade, 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 banging. Give me time, give me space. What's on your mind, it could wait. Plenty riding on my plate. Music and me on a date. I love the way for I know you still got so much to say. Am I wrong for giving my...
All right, y'all. We are here at the end. Let me get myself together.
5 o'clock in the morning. Where you gonna be? Outside on the corner. You better get yourself together.
There we go. Yeah. So this is offerings, affirmations, parting gifts, all questions, all kudos, all final thoughts. Welcome at this time. And then we had a question in the chat that was for LP to expand a little bit on inactive POVs, and then I'll give an address to neurodivergence linked to villainy. And then also, you know, if other folks have questions, then just type them in or raise a hand and we'll get to you. But LP, please offer the rest of whatever you'd like to say about inactive POV.
I'm muting, sorry. So inactive POV are essentially like when you have a multiple POV situation, and you can check this out in stories like, not the first installment of the I Am Number 4 trilogy, but the rest of them. They all have at least 3 POVs. And not all of them are like big plot things. So right now I'm reading the David Bond trilogy. And in the second book, contextually, the story has like 3-ish antagonists, right? So there's a king trying to keep power. There's a woman trying to get power back that was stolen from her family, and there are a group of essentially demons who lost power 2 millennia before, right? And everybody wants their power back. So it focuses on 3 people who have the least power, who don't have a lot of power. The main protagonist is a person who's not aligned with any of the antagonists. And then there are 2 characters who are aligned adjacent to the antagonist. So what you end up doing is, without necessarily, because you don't want the antagonist in this situation, I understand that the writer didn't want the antagonist's thoughts to be clear to the audience in this first person narrative, because if that's the case, there are a bunch of secrets that are going to get let go too early on. But because people are aligned with the antagonists, they don't know everything that's going on. So you're just kind of dealing with their emotions, and they get the reveals when we get the reveals. So when I say passive, the third POV is aligned with one of the antagonists, and we're just kind of watching. And as he goes back and forth with this antagonist person, we start to find out that like she's got some sinister plans, and he has to make decisions about whether or not he's going to go with them or not. But you can, by showing him less, every time he shows up, it's always like not an information dump, but more like you really have to perk up and pay attention. Does that make sense? Okay, cool.
Thank you, LP. I'm gonna quit sharing so we can all be a family again. All right, and then all I know, the question in the chat was about neurodivergence and linked to like its relationship to villainy in certain portrayals. And this is definitely a bigger question in my opinion than like this container has space for. But I'm just gonna try to give a couple of thoughts that I have using the example of like Joker, like the Joaquin Phoenix movie. I really like took issue with the play out of this narrative as we were allowed to like learn about this character's mental health and then watch it deteriorate into terroristic violence, basically. I think that it's a story that feigns complexity. I think it's a story that gives like a stepping stool to a lot of the like white domestic terrorist like things that we see in real life, and validates them in a way through media for people to continue like confirming their biases. So just as like a personal read on that film, I know there's plenty of nuance, but like I feel like ultimately what they were trying to do with it didn't overcome what didn't work with it to me. And so using that as a framing, I think writing neurodivergent characters, in my opinion, anytime, it's important to do a couple of things. One of those things being to offer your character the opportunity for a very, very intentional development before we start thrusting them into situations that are like moving the plot in one way or another, right? It's like we may have to be a little bit more patient with these characters. We want to be able to get to know them at a 360-degree view as much as we can before we start saying they did this because they were annoyed or confused, right? Because at that point, every decision that they make, we're going to link back to their, whatever's going on in their brain. And it can just be like a path of breadcrumbs that sends the wrong message. So early on, as you're developing your character, making sure that we're not only learning about them as a character that is neurodivergent or, in a separate bucket has some kind of mental illness, but that we get a chance to learn about the other aspects of who they are as people as well, right? And then as we continue to integrate them into the plot, we tie their actions to things that are happening. But because we got a full portrait of a character, of a person, we're not automatically linking them to the only things we know about them, which are what's going on with their mind. The other thing that I would offer is that when it's particularly like in the methods component, when this character is making decisions, we can be very clear about like why they're doing things and their own logic or how their thought processes take them from point A to point B. And while some of those things may be connected to some neurodivergence that they're experiencing, when we are intentional about these methods and we've already framed the character up as having more to them than just this one identity, it gives us an opportunity to see how those things are linked and, more importantly, how they are not. So I think choosing methods that are not your stereotypical methods of had a mental breakdown when it started killing people, right? Like choosing methods that are creative and nuanced and aren't these things that have become tropes that are really, like, in my opinion, very dangerous stereotypes and ways of categorizing folks whose brains work differently than others. And so I know I kind of said a lot, but basically, if you're going to have a villain that's a neurodivergent character, then it's all good. Like, we got the talent, we can write these things, but we need to give our character their podium, like before we start attaching these other negative traits to them, which they're going to probably have since they're villains. We need to give them their podium to be seen as a full person. And then as we start delving into how they're going about completing their mission, I think we should take additional care to be really intentional about why they're doing what they're doing and offer some complexity as to what methods they're choosing that are beyond just their mental state. And I hope that any of that made sense. Maurice, I know you had your hand up at one point in time. I don't know if you have anything left.
Oh no, I'm neurodiverse too, so thank you for like bringing it up in the space because it helps a lot, and I try to say it whenever I'm in groups. But I also think that it's interesting, like there's like I haven't talked about like Black neurodiversity or Black being disabled. When they're white, they get studied like Hannibal Lecter. If they're Black and they don't have to be neurodiverse or have disabilities, they get killed. You're dead.
Right.
So
yeah.
I think it's interesting how many opportunities you have in terms of having Black neurodiverse characters, like how they had in Lovecraft Country. It wasn't like neurodiverse or being disabled, but you had racism and the horror monsters going on at the same time. So you had like two different types of scary. So I think that when you have neurodiversity, you have like Black neurodiversity and what it means to like be in a space. Because like I feel like people weren't just scared of Candyman because he would come up in your house or he had a hook. He was scared because he was a Black. he was a Black person. So that was part of it. So I don't know, just something interesting about that. But yeah, but I guess I want to know more about being Black and neurodiverse and having those terms when we make characters, because sometimes I feel that people who aren't Black try to tell me what I can and can't say about being neurodiverse and how I should frame things or say things, and they don't have our experiences of how it intersects with our Blackness and stuff like that. So like this space is a safe space to talk about that. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would relish the opportunity to talk with you more about that, maybe one-to-one, or if there's like another open space. In short, which I would love to like elaborate on later. But in short, to your point about like, how do we depict this intersectionality of who we are? And especially at this point in time in writing, I really feel like, as Tim Fielder was saying earlier, like in a lot of ways, we're in the vanguard of this particular brand of stories, like right now. And so there's a lot of structural sort of like building that writers right now are doing that are going to hit mainstream in ways that writers whose shoulders we stand on haven't been able to like break through with their work. And so, you know, we're obviously not the first like Black neurodivergent writers or anything of that nature, but the opportunities that we have are different in some ways than the opportunities that have been presented to our ancestors, literary and otherwise. And so I think about it from that angle, like we are creating what these portrayals look like and what they mean, and the compassion and care and intentionality that comes with like setting a standard is what I try to hold when I'm writing these types of characters and really anything, knowing that it's going to be hard to get it right and it probably won't happen all the time, but also the intentionality is, I think, what we fall back on there, right? We're able to explain our choices and ground in like what the philosophy was behind why we made the choices we did. Then at the very minimum, we create conversation and make a pathway for us to get better. So yes, would love to keep talking to you about that. Other questions, offerings, thoughts, anything come up for you in your own drafting or outlining where you felt like this is something I'm going to be able to run with?
I think it's all good. I mean, from what you were saying, like your outline of how to basically make sure you're creating a full figured three-dimensional villain, right? And I mean, somebody mentioned in the chat, and it's a saying that's going around a while, villains can be, you know, they're the hero of their own story and whatnot, but also what does that mean in terms of your overall story? And I think what you were doing right here really framed that well, you know, really seeing how it informs our actions and who they are as people, kind of like with the examples you're showing. So I definitely plan to put this into practice myself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm happy that you found it useful. Anything else? I know we're a little bit over, so I don't want to keep y'all, but. Hey, Laura.
I was struggling with creating a character that or the audience wouldn't be able to empathize with, because it's easier if it's black and white and it's a bad person. But all these activities were bringing out a lot more that made it very easy to empathize with this person's choices. But what David shared in the chat actually helped if you approach the philosophy as villainous and try to debunk that and fix that. And that's an approach that I'm thinking about trying and playing with and seeing what happens.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that y'all are able to like connect with each other and learn in that way. Speaking on like technical publishing stuff, which I'm no expert, I'm just on my first, couple of books that I'm trying to put out through the industry. But when I sold like my romance novel, the publisher acquired another book that they don't even know what it is yet. They were like, we love this one and you got to write something else for us as a part of this contract, right? So when we think about creating these characters that are full figured, as LP put in the chat, like from a business standpoint, that is another thing that we offer ourselves. You're doing your work early instead of later, right? I don't know what that book is going to be, but if I make my character strong enough, I have jumping off points. I have characters that I can take and do sequels with or prequels with in that book that have already been created, that I've already put the thought into, so that I don't have to come back and do that later. I just think that that original groundwork is so helpful because you don't really know what opportunities await you out there. And so if you're prepared to branch off from your own IP at any point in time, you're just setting yourself up for, and whether or not they ask for it, right? But just like, if that work is already done, I think you're creating momentum for yourself in a meaningful way. Embarrassed by my past villains. Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'm going to stop this recording.